Welcome to Tansson TV Plus. I'm Brandon,
And I'm Mom.
and thank you so much for joining us here today.
Yep, thank you for joining with us today.
Yeah, and Mom, of course, I always have to ask, how are you doing today?
I am doing fine. Brandon, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, and Mom, what are we doing today?
Today we're going to talk about the season finale of Matlock.
Yes, this is the first season finale titled Tricks of the Trade, Part 1 and Part 2.
Yes, yes. And hopefully we've been able to watch the one in which we talked about the episode right before this one.
Yes, definitely that episode, I was at too, is a very good episode, and I think perfectly led into this finale.
Yep, they sure did. All right, Brandon, you ready for me to tell you a little bit about what this is about?
Go right ahead.
Alrighty. So in this particular episode, Maddie and Olympia, they kind of work together to prove or disprove that Julian was involved with hiding the opioid files.
Mom, thank you so much for that.
You're welcome, Brandon.
Yeah, and overall, yeah, before we head into a discussion, is what do you think of the overall episode? Which, while it is a part 1 and part 2, did air as just a full 2 hour special.
Okay, I'm going to surprise people. I thought it was just okay. I'm sorry. I really, really liked the episode prior to this where Olympia realizes that Maddie is not exactly who she says she is. So I really enjoyed that one. And so this one was just okay. I thought it was a little predictable too, which is surprising for me because this has been the one show that has kind of actually given me surprises.
And that's completely fair. And yeah, and for me, I definitely, of course, enjoyed the episode. And I would say that the series overall has set a very high bar for itself. And so I think that sort of makes it really hard, at least for me, to like judge an individual episode just because like okay for the show is still good for television, just for the show standards, just you know what I mean? Like it sort of shifts the balance, at least in my thoughts.
Yeah, no, I agree totally. I mean, if we're talking about for the show itself, then the show itself is really great. It was just, if we're just going to speak about this one episode alone, it was not the surprise that I thought it would be.
Yeah, definitely fully agree with that. And I really was intrigued by sort of the pacing of the episode in that we had a lot of sort of the continuations of the previous episode towards the beginning. But then in the middle, we had a lot of retrospective to previous parts of the season and sort of going back over that before getting to a lot of the big drama per se at the very end.
Yeah, yes. And this is probably one of the first episodes in which, although I love the mystery that kind of goes on in regards to the clients or who they're defending for their law firm, this is for me, for episode wise, the one that I thought I really like the content of the lawyer portion of it a lot. Um, and so, like I said, which is surprising for me because I'm typically the other way around, where I kind of like to see the content of the people on a regular basis.
And Mom, are you able to speak a little bit about that? Like, what did you enjoy and what did you take away from this episode?
All right, this is one of the things I really enjoyed about the episode. I like the fact that this focused on Sarah. I thought that was kind of fascinating that for the last episode, they decided to actually spend a lot of time giving Sarah a chance to show her character and to show her growing as a lawyer. Sarah, in the past episode, actually sent a letter to her quote unquote clients that really isn't her client, but really but they think is her client. Um, she sent a letter out and really very demanding and so it, in essence, led to a death, sort of one of the people involved. And so she had to defend her client in regards to the death of this individual. And so, because Sarah is the one to actually enact everything, the judge made her actually try the whole case. And so I like that they showed her growth as a lawyer and what she had to do in order to begin this process of actually, you know, providing a defense for her client.
Yeah, and I really also appreciate that this episode focused on Sarah. I mean, we certainly have seen her, yeah, of course, throughout the this first season alongside the other characters. But I'm glad that we were able to make her the focus because we haven't really had a true focus on her per se. There might be times where her and Billy are focused on together, but I think this is the first time that we really allow for her to shine, and everyone else is sort of a like a backup for her in a sense.
Yes, and you could tell that she is still learning, and she's influenced by Maddie and by Olympia. Olympia had to have a word with her and to give her some encouragement, and so you could tell that she is still easily influenced by those around her. But I like that she found her voice in the episode, and that she presented a nice case, and and so I just thought they did a really good job. And what I also liked is that they emphasized Sarah and Billy working together, because I really like them working together to try to help each other.
Yeah, I definitely really enjoy their camaraderie and that they are willing to cover for each other. Of course, I know they both want to really advance in their careers, but at the same time that they're willing to to work together and solve this together because they're in it as a team. And plus, if one of them lose their job, probably the other one's not too far away.
Yeah, very true. I don't think they could be there without each other.
Yeah, and so overall, like going into this episode, did you think it was going to be about Sarah? I mean, I know I was speaking in our last discussion that, yeah, I certainly hoped that we had gotten like a, sort of end of episode in Matlock fashion, surprise about, Sarah or Billy, but I think this did it one up by just focusing the episode on them.
Yeah, I was surprised that the whole episode actually involved Sarah. I really was, because I really thought it would focus on, of course, Olympia and Maddie as they're trying to find out information about Julian. But yeah, I was really surprised that it did focus on Sarah. Like you said, it was a good surprise, but I was surprised.
And I think what that really makes us hit home is whereas the previous episode focused on Olympia, is that we focus on Olympia through the lens of the fact that Maddie has been deceiving her all season. But I mean, she's been deceiving indirectly yeah Sarah as well, and so I think it's such an interesting contrast because whereas Matlock was intentionally deceiving Olympia, to try to get the information out of her, is that Sarah was just sort of the casualty of that.
Yeah, she was just a casualty of it. Olympia was caught. Not Olympia. I'm sorry. Maddie was caught going through Billy's drawers at work, and so she had to make something up real quick in order to cover for herself. And when she did that, she ended up hurting Sarah's feelings in the process, because she asked for Billy to be the one to actually present in a court case instead of Sarah, as promised previously. And Sarah was not too happy about that.
Yeah, there was a long time that she wanted to essentially destroy Matlock, expose her secret, whatever that may be. She didn't find anything, but I like that this is sort of able to have Maddie attempt to try to redeem that. And even though, of course, Sarah still has no idea about the whole thing that Olympia and Maddie have been working on all episode, is that at least she was there for her. But I'm surprised Matlock didn't actually have as much of a role in helping out Sarah as I thought she would have.
Yeah, actually, I was surprised too. I think at this point in time, it was just her support that Sarah needed, and she was there for her during the court case in regards to just being there itself, since Olympia had to slip out.
Yeah, and I did want to speak. Yeah, I know we're speaking about sort of the developments up to the whole Sarah storyline, but I want to speak about her as a character. Like, what do you think of Sarah as a character?
I like her. She's an eager beaver. I do like Sarah as a character, and I think there's a lot that they could really develop with her.
Yeah, and I really like that throughout the season we're able to see her sort of explore who she is and her own worth, because we see that that she notices that she's being passed over for opportunities. Her and Billy had already been working at the firm when Matlock just snuck herself in, quite literally, and became like Olympia's one confidant. And so you can see that Sarah was a bit hurt by that, especially hurt when Matlock gave away her case. But that instead of using that for vengeance, although she did try, that she opted to try to use Olympia as her mentor, and she began personal relationships. She began confiding in Billy, and so I like that we're able to have these parallel storylines throughout the season, and that they're not just people to be there in the background, like they're characters in of themselves.
Yep, they really are. They really are. But at the same time, Brandon, I will say that there were a couple surprises for me during this episode, and that did not involve Sarah.
And what were
And
they?
All right. One of them is at the end of the episode, and I'm so sorry if you haven't seen this. There are a lot of spoilers. Maybe we should have said that up front. But at the end of the episode, Billy's ex girlfriend kind of pops up and says she's pregnant. That one I was not expecting. You were kind of you kind of predicted that, and that one I was not. I was surprised about. And then, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly was, yeah, interested about that. And I'll let you head to your next thought, but only because they were showing her from sort of the, yeah, from the front up. I was just like, huh, that's suspicious. It's like, is she going to say she's pregnant? And so, sure enough, she is. But keep on going, Mom.
Yeah, and then not to change topics, but the other one was involved the bank. And my question was, why was Julian at the bank? I don't know if they necessarily established why she was at the bank, because at the end he did pop up in order to see Olympia.
Yeah, that certainly was interesting. They never did explain that. And something that just occurred to me just now that might explain it, maybe. Because I know we're thinking, maybe the bank people called him or something. But I think another explanation might be because Olympia was going there under the guise of, making sure that she is on the family's savings accounts.
Hmm.
Is that she had brought that up to Julian earlier, that, what she made up that she's not on the savings actually was legitimate. So maybe he was going there, investigating for himself. That's the only real in-universe explanation that I think we might have, only because he does seem to want to be there for Olympia and for the kids, despite all of his flaws.
Yeah. And then the last thing that kind of surprised me a little bit was that, and they may have mentioned this before, and I just didn't pick up on it, but the fact that Edwin, Manny, and Alfie all moved to New York in order to help with the case. That didn't hit me that they moved there purposely. I just thought they'd been in New York there for a while. And I didn't realize that they didn't plan to stay in New York and that they had planned to move back to California. That surprised me too. And so those are the three things that kind of stood up as genuine surprises for me. And they're not big things. They're just things that either I just didn't pick up or things that they just kind of maybe gave a little bit and I didn't quite gather that they were trying to tell us this. All right, Brandon, were there any surprises for you?
Yeah, to touch on that last one, I was definitely surprised in that, that they're so ready to go back to their lives, at least Edwin. And so I do remember the flashbacks where they showed that they were moving to New York City to, establish, Matlock's cover. But, I had thought it was more of a permanent stay and not a temporary one for the sake of the Matlock's job. So I thought that was quite interesting, especially considering that now that the cover's been blown, that they're moving right now. I would have thought that they'll have at least let her finish the case out.
Yeah, actually, I would have thought so too, because Edwin was very quick to say that he was ready to have the realtors come and start to look to try to sell the house.
Yeah, so that definitely did shock me because even if they were just preparing, to move, I think that'd be one thing, but that they're already moving, and it makes me wonder how big their normal house is. I mean, they're temporary houses and mansions in the middle of nowhere, so how big is their regular one?
I know. And I will say one of the things that did not surprise me was Alfie and the father. I knew that eventually Alfie's father was going to show up. And so they've been leading and hinting around this. And so I was not surprised at the end with the person who thinks is Alfie's father did come to the door.
Yeah, you did mention that in the video last week that you're pretty sure that's where it was going to lead to.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm sorry, and I didn't mean to interrupt before. Were there surprises for you?
I would say that, again, my hope was that there was going to be at least some focus on Billy and Sarah. And so I'm glad that there was, so that was somewhat of a surprise. But I was actually surprised in the way that they use flashbacks within this, because they use a lot of flashbacks. Not necessarily in a bad way, but there were certainly quite a bit.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of time they were reflecting a little bit on what Maddie has said previously, but they were all using her words to help them in whatever situation they were in. And in some cases, they used their same words to turn against Maddie in regards to, like, for example, Olympia spoke about her daughter, and when she was going to the bank and said she needed to go there by herself. And so, kind of going for that emotion for Maddie, Maddie wasn't able to fight back like she normally does.
Yeah, so I definitely was intrigued by that, and I'm trying to think what were some other things. I'm surprised Shay didn't return, because they had a whole arc in the middle of the season about how they think that she may or may not have been involved, and so while she certainly was in many of the flashbacks, she wasn't in it, and nor was the redditor. Uh, she was not in the episode as well, so I'm somewhat surprised about that because we had seen her being a pivotal part of everything. So the fact that she wasn't there, I was like, oh, I would have expected for her to be there.
I know, and maybe they have plans for on season 2 to kind of bring back Shay and to have the Redditor come on board again, meaning in regards to shedding some more light on things that are going on.
Yeah, and I should point out the writer's name is Miss Belvin.
Yes, yes, thank you, Brandon. Let's see. And then I know we really haven't talked about the plot at all per se in regards to Maddie and Olympia. But in my predictions, I kind of do talk a little bit about it for next season. And so my thought is at the end of the episode, for those who are watching, we do find out that Julian is the one who did take the report, and Olympia's questioning Julian about it, and Julian looks he answers the questions, I believe. He pretty well as best as he can, and he explains that it's because of his father, or his trying to get the love from his father, or the respect from his father. It's the reason he kind of did it, and he did explain that it was so many years ago, and he was young at that time period. And so I was thinking about predictions for next season about whether or not Olympia would actually show Maddie the evidence, and my thought is no. Um, I think that Olympia is actually going to show Maddie the bank records, and because at this point in time the bank records don't show anything, I think she's going to show Maddie the bank records. But I think she is going to help Julian either hide or destroy the evidence. What are your thoughts about that, Bran?
So I hesitate in the part of the destroy the evidence, but she might try to, per se, play dumb, so to speak, in the sense of, Julia, what you do, with this is yours. I'm not involved with this. That's a part of my hunch, but I think what's interesting is that Julian's defense as to why he did this, why he hit it, was the same exact justifications, almost word for word, of why Maddie Matlock wanted to do this, as she was explaining to her husband Edwin, and that she felt invisible in her, in her life. She wanted a way to, to get involved and to be into good graces, and so for Maddie that was to avenge her daughter, and for Julian this was to get into good graces with her dad. So I'm curious as to, not that I think Maddie will ever per se forgive Julian for this, because it did take the life of her daughter, but she might be more understanding than she thinks. So that might lead to a moral dilemma for both Olympia, Julian, and Maddie if and when she finds out. And that makes me wonder too, going into season 2, whereas we spent all of this season seeing Matlock's inner workings and how she's, you know, changing things, for her outward persona. Is I'm curious as to see if we're going to see any of Olympia doing that, because now that we have established that she has her own, motives and behind the scenes stuff, that I wonder if we're going to divvy it up into future seasons where maybe Matlock's not the only one with a secret.
Yeah, that's true too. We could go into that. And then we had Alfie's father kind of pop in at the end of the episode. My prediction is that is not really Alfie's father. Now, whether or not he's trying to do a con job or whether or not he just thinks he's Alfie's father is one thing, but I just don't think it's going to be Alfie's father. I think that's way too easy. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I definitely agree. This is way too easy. Even if it does turn out to be the father, I again, it's too easy for the show. The show has done a really good job of pacing itself out and setting up premises and different reveals a little bit early, like with little Easter eggs before it does the reveal. So I definitely think they set up his showing up at the end, but whether that's actually him, I think remains to be seen.
Yeah. And then I think that Sarah and Billy are going to grow closer, and that's just general talks. I just think they are. And then I think they're going to let Sarah work on some more cases, which will be interesting to see if they allow her to do that. And then at the end, we have Billy and his ex. I think they're going to let Billy marry his ex, and I don't know why I say that, but I think they're going to let him marry the ex. Now, whether or not this is his child or something else, but I think they might let that happen. Your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think this is such an interesting development because Billy was really in love with Claudia, tried to propose to her, and she had basically said that she doesn't even like him, that he's just comfortable and around him and hurt his feelings. So the fact, but he did briefly mention in passing that he had been sneaking around for on occasion, but which is something that we hadn't known up to this point. But the fact that he is potentially now the father, I think will be interesting. I wouldn't doubt that he marries her, but is that what she wants? Is that what he wants? Because I mean, he did want it, but I mean, she hurt his feelings by, faking love for years. So I don't know. That might even be a little mystery in of itself. Have a Billy episode next season.
Yeah. And then for Maddie herself, I think they're going to let her continue being a lawyer. I mean, obviously the show's about her, but she and her husband are disagreeing about whether or not she needs to continue law. And Maddie has grown that as a self that she is liking what she's doing. She likes the influence that she has with the young people, and to include Olympia on there also. And so I think, and she's good at her job. So I think they're going to let her continue being a lawyer. Now, what happens to Edwin, I'm not quite sure what they're going to do with him. But I also predict Bitsy will be back at some point. So those are my general predictions for next season. Brand, did you have anything different or?
Yeah, I definitely believe that Bitsy will be back for next season and hopefully for a longer role. And I'd love for Edwin to be back because I really like the character and the actor alongside Alfie. But their disagreement, what's interesting is that we sort of have led to this, throughout the season. I mean, we've seen their various small disagreements, but yeah, Edwin usually caves in because it's overall for the bigger mission of, yeah, of course, Maddie's health and safety, but then also for the case. But now that the case is largely wrapped up, or at least that's what they think as of this point in time, I don't think it's going to be a simple solution, like a one episode solution, because first they have to deal with the whole Alfie's potential father situation, but then dealing into what's happening. And I really love the explanation that they gave as to why this resonates so much with Maddie, because we found out she is indeed a lawyer, and that she was a contract lawyer, and that she had retired when her daughter died to take care of Alfie full time. Whereas Edwin, he had continued on teaching before retiring, and that he wants her to stay home because this is how he pictured his retired life. But given that Matlock's whole work schedule and life has all been around his career, I think she brings an interesting case that he's had his time and now she wants her time in the prime time.
Yeah,
No
she
pun
does.
intended.
Yes. No, she does have a good case there. Um, Oh, something that we didn't talk about, Brandon, was Senior. And because we've left him out and he's not innocent at all in any of this. And so the question is, what will they do with Senior next year? Will they go after him next? Because Maddie did allude to that at some point, that if Julian was the innocent one, that they would go after Senior. You know, Olympia is a partner now, but will she turn against her own company to take down Senior? Um, I don't even know how to even what they would do on that front. But it's just something to think about as we go through to the next season.
Absolutely. And considering that, her company, her firm is also his company, which, he's a part of it. And I know by the previous bet they made is that Julian's now out of a job too. So what does that mean?
Yeah, Julian said he just turned in his resignation. So this will be interesting to watch. And then we're also introduced this for this episode, and I think this is the first episode, to Julia's mother. Have we seen her before, Brian?
Not to my knowledge, and they've barely even mentioned her prior to this point.
Yeah, and so it'll be interesting to see if she pops up later with another. I mean, she could have secrets of her own.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that we didn't fully have resolved, if I'm remembering correctly, is we don't actually know how Julian got the money for the brownstone because they established that there was no secret transactions, but he had the documents and he randomly came into money, so maybe his mom actually gave him the money.
Yeah, they alluded to that, or they point blank said it at some point, but then the mom doesn't remember giving the money. And so she played it off too. So I don't know if there's another secret going on that they're not talking about and how he actually got the money. It was not, I don't believe at this point, this was the opioid money. It may have been different money and how he was able to afford their house.
Yeah, so definitely is interesting. And one plot that I'm not surprised that they didn't cover in the final episodes, but I'm surprised it didn't overall get resolved or some sort of note on it is Olympia's on and off relationship with Elijah.
Yeah, he wasn't in there at all. And I guess that could come out later. Hopefully it won't, but I guess it will at some point in time.
Yeah, so I'm definitely quite curious about that. We did put it in last week to Sarah's relationship with Kira, but we do get a little bit of an interesting situation uh, where Sarah's nemesis, so to speak, that had been previously on and off dating Billy, that she is now sort of after revenge, sort of, because Billy's dumped her, and she thinks it's because he's trying to be with Sarah. So the way that they left that, while they didn't draw attention to it much, I think is definitely setting up for her trying to take revenge in some fashion next season because we saw her speaking to Sarah's clients, and then she just sort of walked off, and we shifted away from her. So I don't think your story is over yet.
No, it probably is not. I would say I would love to hear what you guys think about this last episode of Matlock. Please put in the comments and let us know what you think. What are your predictions for next year?
Yeah, and Mom, how would you rate this episode?
Actually, Brandon, you'll be surprised. I think I'm going to rate this out of 1 out of 5, 5 being the highest. Maybe a 3+ would end up being a C+. And I know this sounds surprising, but I would go there, or B- or 4-, however you want to say it. But I would go to one of those two, just because I thought the episode before was a 5, and this to me was not quite a 5. This to me was it didn't have. I was waiting for surprises, and it didn't have the surprises that I kind of wanted to have. Well written, but it just didn't have the surprises that I wanted to have. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I 100%, like I said, understand that. For me, I'd probably go with, my traditional 4 out of 5. And but the reason as to why I would put it there is because I think it did overall, it was overall a good episode, and I believe that it hit many of the elements it needed to hit, and with a few different surprises. But at the same time, I don't feel that it was necessarily a 2 hour episode. I think it was more so like an hour and a half, and not like 2 hours, because we spent quite a while sort of reflecting back on the whole season. And so I think it just needed a little bit more than its usual episode length, and not necessarily 2 episodes, if that makes sense.
Actually, it does. It does make a lot of sense. It does. All right, Brandon. I said it's been great talking to you about this.
Yeah, it definitely has. I've been enjoying it.
Oh yes. Well, everybody, we hope you have a great day.
And we'll see you next time.
All right. Bye bye, everybody.